I'd like to provide a little bit of a brief overview about the screening and how things have changed in the export compliance landscape over the past 20 or so years. The United States and global export controls are moving away from the old Cold War COCOM type export controls, where you had exports restricted to certain communist or embargoed countries. Today's export controls are more targeted at specific entities and individuals who seek to do harm to the United States and her allies, or otherwise violate U.S. or international laws and regulations. And that's why denied party screening has become so important today, because we've gone away from complete embargoes against entire countries, but rather targeted sanctions against individuals and entities. So with that, let's look at some of the background on the laws and regulations that require us to screen. First of all, we have the Arms Export Control Act, or AECA. We have the Export Administration Act, which the arms obviously is for your military and your ITAR type commodities. The EAA, or Export Administration Act, which is currently being held in effect through the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, is the law behind the Export Administration regulations. And then there's other laws. We have Trading with the Enemy Act. I mentioned IEEPA, CISADA, and various executive orders that the presidents over the years have issued. And these are a lot of the background about why certain entities and parties have been blocked. Within the regulations, we have the ITAR, the International Traffic in Arms Regulations, and specifically within the ITAR, the very first section there, Part 120 and 120.1 C2, it talks about the Department of State denials or suspensions and how certain parties would be ineligible to do business if they were deemed to be ineligible, for example, being debarred. Within the Export Administration regulations, there's a number of areas there, primarily in Part 736, which covers our general prohibitions. For example, General Prohibition 4 covers denial orders, and General Prohibition 5 covers prohibited end uses and prohibited end users. We also have EAR Part 774, and there's a number of different sections that, if you're not familiar with these, you should. Number one, for the prohibited end uses, which even if your products do not require licenses to certain countries, the fact that they might be used in, for example, certain prohibited end uses like nuclear or chemical, biological weapons, unmanned aerial vehicles, and that type of thing. And Marina is going to talk a little bit more about that later. But be familiar with Part 744 of the EAR. For example, in Part 744.8, there's blocking party of weapons of mass destruction proliferators. Part 744.10 has restrictions on certain entities in Russia. Part 744.11 is entities acting contrary to the United States national security or foreign policy of the United States, and so on. So there's a number of areas that cover our restricted or denied persons within the EAR. And again, most of those you'll find in Part 744. And then there are also the OFAC sanctions programs, which include our denied, our specially designated nationals, and a number of other lists, which I'll drill into in a bit more detail here in a second. And then there are other countries, for example, the EU sanctions programs and various sanctions programs of countries around the globe. So we're going to speak primarily on the US sanctions because we're typically or generally US companies on this webinar today. And I'll keep it, but keep in mind that there are other sanctions programs, and if you're doing business in these countries, you should familiarize yourself with those and screen for the denied or restricted parties accordingly. The second key point of why we screen is to avoid potential illegal diversion. For example, the unverified lists list companies that may not necessarily require a license, but there's a high risk of diversion of your commodities that you export for those companies listed on the unverified list. And in that case, you'd need a UVL statement to go along with your record-keeping requirements for those entities. And thirdly, to ensure the integrity of your customers, suppliers, partners, and employees. So even if your entity that you're screening, even if it's legal to do business with them, you may want to consider that, are these the kind of people that you want to do business with because they're on a list? Perhaps, they're on a different list. It doesn't pertain to the United States sanctions programs, but again, there may be reasons why your company would consider not doing business with these folks. And then lastly, to avoid fines, penalties, loss of export privileges, and the loss of company's reputation. When these things get out in the news, you certainly don't want to find your company in a position where your competitors are saying, hey, did you see what happened to XYZ company? There was a big thing in the Wall Street Journal yesterday about this export violation that they were embroiled in. So these are the reasons why we screen, and I certainly believe that all of us on the call today want to do the right thing. We're on this call because we're trying to comply with the laws and regulations, and that's what hopefully we're helping you to do today.